The great hall of the Galactic Council was silent. 12 alien species sat in their seats, each one representing billions of lives across 1,000 star systems. They had gathered today for one purpose and one purpose only. They were going to vote on the fate of humanity. High Arbiter raised his clawed hand and the final murmurs died away. His grey skin was smooth and his eyes were black as the void between stars. He had served the council for 300 years and had seen many votes, but this one felt different. This one felt necessary. Ambassador Han of the Collective spoke first. His body glowed with soft blue light that pulsed with his emotions. Right now that light was flickering fast, showing his anger and his fear. He pointed one long finger at the holographic display that floated in the center of the chamber. The display showed a small blue planet orbiting a yellow star, Earth, the human. "Look at them," Han said. 300 years ago they were burning dead plants to power their primitive machines. Now they have antimatter drives. Now they bend space itself to travel between stars. No species has ever advanced this fast. It is not natural, it is dangerous. The crystalline form of the Ari representative sparkled as it moved. Its voice sounded like breaking glass. They spread like a disease. Every world they touch changes. Their music plays in our cities. Their food is sold in our markets. Their ideas infect our young ones. They are a cultural plague. Across the chamber they clicked their mandibles in agreement. The aquatic bubbled their support through their water tanks. Even the gentle, who had traded peacefully with humans for decades, their furry heads with reluctance. The vote was going to pass. Everyone in the chamber knew it. Far away from the council chamber, past 100,000 light-years of empty space, Commander Kyle stood on the bridge of his ship. The vessel was called the Vigilance, and it hung in the darkness at the very edge of the human solar system. Around it floated 700 other ships, each one carrying thousands of sleeping passengers. Kyle was 58 years old. His hair had turned grey long ago and his face was lined with the weight of command. He had served in the Earth Force for 40 years, fighting pirates and protecting colony ships and standing guard against threats that never came. Now he faced the greatest mission of his life. Lieutenant Price looked up from her console. She was young, barely 30, with short brown hair and sharp green eyes. She had been Kyle's second in command for 5 years and he trusted her completely. "Sir," she said, "our listening posts have confirmed it. The council is voting right now. The result is not in doubt." Kyle slowly, he had expected this. They had all expected this. The humans had known about the council's plans for years. Their spies had reported every secret meeting, every whispered conversation, every plan made against them. The aliens thought they were clever, but they had no idea how long humanity had been watching and waiting. "What about the array?" Kyle asked. "Checked her screens. Final calibrations are complete. All 8 billion souls on Earth have been, all colonial populations are accounted for, the ships are ready, we can begin at any time." Kyle turned to look out the observation window. From here Earth was just a tiny blue dot, barely visible against the blackness of space. He had been born on that little world. He had grown up running through green fields and swimming in blue oceans. He had fallen in love there, married there, buried his wife there when the cancer took her 10 years ago. Now he was going to watch it disappear. "Sir," said softly, "are you sure about this?" Kyle did not answer right away. He thought about the children sleeping in the ships around him. He thought about the families who had packed their lives into small bags and walked onto transport vessels without knowing where they would end up. He thought about the billions of people on Earth who were going about their normal lives, eating breakfast and going to work, and about sports, not knowing that in a few hours their entire world would change forever. "No," he said finally, "I am not sure, but I am certain that the alternative is worse." Back in the council chamber, the vote was proceeding. One by one, the representatives pressed their buttons and recorded their decisions. The voted yes. The Ari voted yes. The voted yes. The voted yes. Even the, after a long pause, voted yes. Watch the tally climb higher and higher. When the last vote was cast, he rose from his seat and spread his arms wide. "It is decided," he announced. "By unanimous vote, this council has determined that the human species poses an unacceptable threat to galactic peace and stability. A sterilization fleet will be assembled within one solar cycle. The human and all associated colonies will be cleansed. Their technology will be destroyed. Their culture will be erased. Let the record show that we acted in the interest of all sentient life." The chamber erupted in a mix of relief and celebration. The delegates congratulated each other. The Ari sang songs of victory in their crystal voices. Only the sat quietly, their large eyes filled with something that might have been regret. None of them noticed the tiny particles floating in the air around them. The particles were smaller than dust, invisible to every scanner and sensor the council possessed. They had drifted through the chamber for decades, recording every word, every vote, every secret plan. and right now they were transmitting everything back to human space. Kyle received the notification on his private channel. He read it once, then twice, then closed his eyes for a long moment. "The vote is complete," he said. "It was unanimous." His face went pale, but her voice stayed steady. "Orders, sir." Kyle opened his eyes. He looked around the bridge at the men and women who had chosen to stay awake for this moment. They were all watching him, waiting for him to speak. He could see fear in some of their eyes, but he could also see trust. They believed in him. They believed in the plan. "All ships," Kyle said, his voice carrying across the fleet-wide communication network, "initiate Exodus protocol. May we find peace in the spaces between." The Exodus array came to life. It was a ring of satellites positioned at the very edge of the solar system, hidden among the icy rocks that no alien telescope had ever bothered to scan. The scientists who built it called it the greatest achievement in human history. The engineers who maintained it called it a miracle made of math and metal. Kyle called it their only hope. The array generated a field that bent reality itself. It reached out across the solar system, touching every planet, every moon, every asteroid, every ship. It wrapped around the sun itself, that ancient ball of fire that had warmed human faces since the first cave dweller looked up at the sky. And then, slowly at first, but with gathering speed, everything began to shimmer and fade. The Council's observation satellites recorded the whole thing. They watched as Earth flickered like a candle flame and then vanished. They watched as Mars disappeared, then Jupiter, then Saturn. They watched as the sun itself and died, not with an explosion but with a gentle sigh, as if it was simply tired of shining. Within 17 minutes there was nothing left. No Earth, no colonies, no ships, not even empty space, just a void where humanity had once dreamed their first dreams. The humans were gone, and no one in the galaxy knew where they had gone to. 300 years passed, and the galaxy changed in ways no one could have predicted. The collective expanded their empire, swallowing up the empty space where humanity had once lived. They built research stations in the void, hoping to find some trace of human technology, some clue about how an entire species had managed to vanish into thin air. They found nothing. The eye grew old and slow. Their crystal bodies cracked with age and their songs grew quieter. They had celebrated the vote that day 3 centuries ago, but now the celebration felt hollow. They had voted to destroy an enemy, and instead that enemy had simply walked away. It felt less like victory and more like being ignored. The Galactic Council continued to meet in their great hall, but the meetings felt different now. There was a shadow over every discussion, a question that no one wanted to ask out loud. What if the humans came back? What if they were angry? What if they had spent 300 years building weapons and planning revenge? Ambassador Han the Younger sat in the same seat his ancestor had occupied on the day of the vote. His skin glowed with the same blue light, but his eyes held a different emotion. His great-grandfather had been afraid of humans. Han the Younger was afraid of what humans might have become. "You are telling me," he said to the scientist standing before him, "that after 3 centuries of searching we still have no idea where they went?" Chief Investigator Elle spread her 4 arms in a gesture of helplessness. She was like Han, but she had spent her entire life studying the human mystery. Her scales were worn thin from years of stress, and her eyes were tired from its screens. "Every theory has been explored, Ambassador. We have scanned the dimensional frequencies they were researching. We have probed alternate timelines. We have sent ships into the deepest reaches of space. The humans are simply gone." "Gone," Han repeated. 8 billion people and an entire star system do not simply go. "And yet they did." The conversation was interrupted by a chime from Elle's communication device. She looked at it, and her face went pale. "Ambassador," she said, "you need to see this." A holographic display flickered to life, showing a remote mining outpost at the edge of known space. The mining ship Endless Fortune had been drilling for rare minerals in an asteroid field when their sensors detected something unusual. They had sent a probe to investigate. What the probe found was impossible. It was a small structure, no bigger than a personal shuttle, floating in the darkness between asteroids. Its surface was smooth and white, and covered with symbols that the ship's computer identified as an ancient form of human writing. At its center, protected by an energy field that all analysis, was a single object. A photograph. The photograph showed a woman and a young boy standing on a beach. Blue water stretched out behind them and the sun was setting in shades of orange and pink. The woman was holding the boy's hand and they were both smiling. On the back of the photograph, written in ink that was somehow still fresh after 3 centuries, were 6 words. "We have not forgotten you." Han stared at the image for a long time. The woman in the photograph looked so ordinary. She could have been anyone's mother, anyone's sister, anyone's friend. And yet she was part of a species that had performed the impossible, a species that had taken their entire world and moved it somewhere beyond the reach of the most powerful civilization in the galaxy. "This is a message," Elle said quietly. "They want us to know they are still out there." "But why now?" Han asked. "Why after 300 years of silence?" Elle had no answer. In a place that was not quite a place, in a dimension that existed alongside reality but apart from it, the woman from the photograph watched the aliens examine her message. Her name was Hayes, and 3 centuries ago she had been a nurse in a small town in Ohio. She had spent her days caring for sick children and her evenings watching the sunset with her son. Now she was something else, something more. "They found it," she said to the presence beside her. "They found the photograph." The presence took the form of a man with grey hair and tired eyes. His name was Kyle, and he had once commanded the fleet that carried humanity into the unknown. Now he existed as pure consciousness, unbound by flesh or time or the laws of physics. "Good," Kyle said. "It is time they remembered." "Are you sure about this?" asked. "We could stay hidden forever. We could let them forget about us." Kyle shook his head or performed the action that served as shaking his head in this strange dimension. "We did not transcend just to hide. We did not become gods just to cower in the shadows. There is work to be done." Look down at the galaxy spread out beneath them. From here she could see everything, every star, every planet, every living being. She could see the in their council chambers. She could see the tending their gardens. She could see children of a dozen species playing games and asking questions and dreaming about the future. "They are so young," she said, "all of them. Even the species in the galaxy are like children compared to what we have become." "That is why we must help them," Kyle replied. "Not to control them, not to rule them, but to teach them, to show them what is possible. Even after what they did to us, even after they voted to destroy us." Kyle was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft. "Especially after what they did. Fear is a natural thing. They were afraid of us and they reacted the way frightened creatures react. We could hate them for that. We could punish them, but that would make us exactly what they feared we would become." Thought about her son. He was here somewhere, part of the great consciousness that humanity had become. She could feel his presence like a warm light in the back of her mind. He had been 7 years old on the day of the Exodus, too young to understand what was happening. Now he was as old as the stars and as wise as the universe itself. "What do we do first?" she asked. Kyle smiled. "We let them find a few more messages, we let them wonder, we let them hope. And then when they are ready, we show ourselves." Back in the physical realm, the Galactic Council had called an emergency session. Every species sent representatives. Every news network broadcast the proceedings. The photograph from the asteroid field was displayed on a massive screen and billions of beings across the galaxy stared at that simple image of a mother and her son. "This proves they survived," said the new High Arbiter, a named Coral voice who spoke through a translator device. "The humans did not die, they went somewhere else." "But where?" asked the representative, her mandibles clicking with anxiety. "And more importantly, why are they sending us messages now?" The ambassador, an old creature with silver fur and gentle eyes, raised his hand for attention. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "they are not sending threats. Perhaps they are sending greetings." Laughter rippled through the chamber. The idea seemed absurd. The council had voted to exterminate humanity. Why would humans respond with friendship? But in the dimension between dimensions, Kyle and billions of other human consciousnesses watched the debate with patience and hope. They had waited 300 years. They could wait a little longer. The truth was coming, and when it arrived, it would change everything. 200 more years passed, and the messages kept coming. A RE exploration vessel found a music box floating near a dying star. When they opened it, a soft melody played, a human lullaby that had been sung to children for thousands of years. The song was so beautiful that the crystalline beings wept, their tears falling like drops of liquid diamond. A colony discovered a garden growing on a barren moon. The plants were from Earth, flowers and trees and vegetables that should not have been able to survive in the harsh environment, but they grew tall and strong, fed by an energy source that no scientist could identify. They received a gift on the anniversary of the vote. It appeared in the center of their capital city without warning, a statue carved from white stone. The statue showed a child holding hands with a human child. At the base were words carved in both languages: "Friendship waits for those who are ready." Each message was gentle, each message was kind, and each message made the galaxy more and more afraid. Because the messages proved something that the Council did not want to admit, the humans had not just survived, they had evolved into something beyond understanding. They could appear anywhere they wanted. They could create anything they desired. They could watch everything and no one could stop them. On the 500th anniversary of the Exodus, the waiting ended. The science vessel Eternal Question was studying an unusual energy signature in deep space when its sensors detected something approaching. The object was small, about the size of a human woman, and it was moving toward them at impossible speed. Before the captain could order evasive action, the object stopped directly in front of the main viewport. It was not an object at all, it was a person. She floated in the vacuum of space without a suit, without protection, without even breathing. Her body glowed with soft golden light and her eyes were filled with stars. She smiled at the frightened crew and raised one hand in a gesture of peace. "My name is Hayes," she said, and somehow her voice carried through the emptiness of space directly into the minds of everyone aboard. "I was once a nurse from Ohio. Now I am something more. I come with a message for the Galactic Council. Will you carry it for me?" The captain, a veteran named who had served in deep space for 60 years, found himself unable to speak. He had seen many strange things in his career, but nothing like this. Nothing like a human woman floating in the void as if she belonged there. "What message?" he finally managed to ask. Smile grew warmer. "Tell them we are ready to talk. Tell them we come in peace. Tell them we have a gift to share if they are willing to receive it." She reached out and touched the viewport with one glowing finger. Where she touched, words appeared, burned into the transparent material in letters of golden light. "We forgive you, now let us help you grow." Then she vanished, disappearing as quickly as she had arrived, leaving behind only the words and a crew full of who would never forget what they had seen. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was the largest gathering in recorded history. Every species sent their leaders. Every faction demanded a voice. The great hall was packed with beings of every shape and size, all of them at the golden words that had been carefully transporting from the science vessel. "We forgive you," read the new High Arbiter, a young named Soft Paw who had been chosen for her wisdom and her calm nature. "Now let us help you grow." The chamber erupted in chaos. Some delegates shouted in fear, others demanded immediate military action, a few sat in stunned silence, unable to process what they were hearing. "This is a trap," declared the ambassador, his skin flashing red with anger. "They are trying to make us lower our guard, then they will strike." "With what?" asked the RE representative. "If they can appear anywhere they want, if they can survive in the vacuum of space, if they can burn words into solid material with a touch, then they do not need tricks. They could destroy us whenever they choose. The fact that they have not done so suggests that destruction is not their goal." The debate continued for hours. Arguments flew back and forth across the chamber. Some species wanted to accept the human offer, others wanted to reject it, most simply did not know what to do. Finally, Soft Paw raised her hand for silence. "We are afraid," she said, her voice carrying through the sudden quiet. "We have been afraid for 500 years. Fear has guided our policies and shaped our decisions, but fear has not protected us. Fear has not given us answers. Fear has only made us smaller and weaker." She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of each delegation in turn. "I say we accept the offer, not because we trust the humans, not because we believe their words, but because fear has failed us and it is time to try something else." The vote was not unanimous this time. They opposed it, as did several smaller species who remembered the old stories about human aggression and expansion, but the majority approved, and that was enough. A message was sent into the void, a simple message, broadcast on every frequency humanity had ever used. "We accept your offer, we are ready to talk." The response came within seconds. The air in the center of the council chamber began to shimmer and glow. Light gathered and swirled, forming a shape that grew more solid with each passing moment. When the light faded, a woman stood before the assembled delegates. She was the same woman who had appeared to the science vessel. Hayes, former nurse, current ambassador for a species that had transcended physical reality. She wore simple clothes, a white shirt and blue pants, and her feet were bare. She looked ordinary, almost forgettable, but her eyes still held the light of distant stars. "Thank you for receiving me," she said. "I know this is difficult, I know you have questions, I will try to answer them as honestly as I can." "Start with the obvious question," Soft Paw said. "What have you become?" "We have become what every species has the potential to become. We exist in a dimension beyond physical matter, beyond time, beyond death itself. We can reshape reality with our thoughts. We can travel anywhere in an instant. We have solved every problem that ever plagued our species. Hunger, disease, war, loneliness, all of it is gone." "That sounds like paradise," the ambassador said softly. "It is," agreed, "but paradise is not meant to be enjoyed alone. That is why we have returned, that is why we want to help you." The ambassador stepped forward, his glow pulsing with suspicion. "Help us how? By making us like you, by absorbing us into your collective." Shook her head. "We are not here to change you against your will. We are here to show you the path. Whether you walk it is your choice. And if we refuse, then we withdraw, we watch from afar. We intervene only when necessary, as we have done for the past 5 centuries. We have no desire to control you. We only want to offer what we have learned." The chamber fell silent as the delegates considered her words. 500 years of fear and confusion, and wondering what had happened to the humans. And now the answer stood before them, wearing simple clothes and speaking simple words. "What happens next?" Softpaw asked. Smiled, and for a moment she looked exactly like the woman in the photograph, the mother on the beach holding her son's hand and watching the sunset. "Next," she said, "we begin together." The teaching began slowly. Did not come alone. Other humans appeared across the galaxy, each one assigned to a different species, each one tasked with knowledge and wisdom. They appeared as glowing figures who could walk through walls and speak directly into minds. They appeared as ordinary people who sat in coffee shops and talked about philosophy. They appeared as dreams, visiting sleeping beings with visions of what could be. They were the first to embrace the teachings fully. They had always been a peaceful species, more interested in art and music than in conquest and war. The human ambassador assigned to them was a man named Peter Collins, who had been a high school teacher in California before the Exodus. He spent his days walking through gardens, talking about consciousness and connection and the nature of reality. "The universe is bigger than you think," he told a group of young students one warm afternoon. "What you see, what you touch, what you measure with your instruments, that is only a tiny fraction of what exists. Beyond this dimension there are others. Beyond this reality there are more, and in those spaces anything is possible." "How do we reach those spaces?" asked a student with bright, curious eyes. Peter smiled. "You start by changing how you think. You stop seeing yourself as separate from the universe and start understanding that you are part of it. Every atom in your body was forged in the heart of a star. Every thought in your mind is a pattern of energy that connects you to everything else. When you truly understand that connection, when you feel it in your bones, then you begin to change." The lessons spread. They shared what they learned with the passed the knowledge to even the suspicious began to listen, though they kept their doubts close to their hearts. Not everyone was happy about the changes. There were protests on some worlds. There were speeches about preserving tradition and resisting alien influence. Some beings looked at the transcended humans with fear and called them monsters wearing friendly masks. Understood their concerns. She remembered what it was like to be small and afraid, to look up at the stars and wonder if anything up there wanted to hurt her. She had felt that fear on the day of the Exodus, standing in a transport ship with thousands of other refugees, not knowing if they would survive the journey or where they would end up. She visited the protesters herself, appearing in their meetings and listening to their arguments. She did not try to convince them they were wrong. She did not use her powers to change their minds. She simply listened and acknowledged their feelings and promised that no one would be forced to accept the human teachings. "We came here to offer a gift," she said to a crowd of angry on there. "A gift is only valuable if it is freely given and freely received. If you do not want what we offer, we will respect that choice. We will not be offended. We will not be hurt. We will simply wait, and perhaps you will be ready." Some of the protesters softened. Others remained firm in their rejection, accepted both outcomes with equal grace. Meanwhile, in the dimension beyond physical reality, the transcended humans watched and discussed and debated among themselves. They were not a single mind. They were billions of individual consciousnesses, each one preserving its unique personality and memories while also being connected to all the others. They disagreed about many things. They argued about methods and timelines and how much to reveal. Kyle, who had commanded the Exodus fleet 5 centuries ago, was one of the most cautious voices. He worried that they were moving too fast, revealing too much, pushing the younger species toward changes they were not ready for. "We took 500 years to reach transcendence," he reminded the others during one of their gatherings. "We made mistakes along the way. We learned from those mistakes. These species have not had the same time to prepare." "But they have us to guide them," argued Price, who had been Kyle's second in command and was now one of the most active teachers in the physical realm. "We can help them avoid our mistakes. We can show them the shortcuts we discovered. And if they are not ready for those shortcuts, what if we push them too hard and they break?" The debate continued without resolution. That was the nature of the transcended. They could discuss anything for as long as they wanted. They had eternity. Back in the physical realm, the first breakthrough happened on a colony world. A young artist named Gentle Wind had been studying the human teachings for 3 years. She had meditated daily, practiced the mental exercises, opened her mind to the connections that bound all things together. One morning she woke up and found that she could see that did not exist in the normal spectrum. She could hear sounds that no ear could detect. She could feel the heartbeat of the planet beneath her, the slow pulse of life that flowed through every rock and tree and creature. She told her teachers, and they brought her too. "You have taken the first step," said, examining the young with eyes that could see beyond the physical. "Your consciousness is beginning to expand beyond its original limits. How does it feel?" Gentle Wind thought about the question. "It feels like waking up from a dream," she said finally. "Like I have been asleep my whole life and now I am finally opening my eyes." "That is exactly what it is. The change will continue if you let it. Your body will eventually become unnecessary. Your mind will grow until it can contain the entire universe. You will become like us if that is what you choose." "Is that what I should choose?" Shook her head. "That is not for me to say. The path is yours to walk or not walk. Some beings reach this point and decide to go back to their normal lives. There is no shame in that choice. The important thing is that you made it yourself." Gentle Wind looked at her own hands, at the fur that covered her fingers and the claws that them. She thought about her family, her friends, the world she had known since birth. She thought about the future that was offering, a future of infinite possibility and eternal existence. "I want to keep going," she said. "I want to see what I can become." Smiled, "Then we will walk the path together." News of Gentle Wind's transformation spread across the galaxy. Some species celebrated it as proof that the human promises were real. Others condemned it as evidence of human manipulation. The debate grew louder and more heated with each passing day. But the teaching continued. The humans appeared in schools and temples and government buildings. They answered questions and shared wisdom and demonstrated powers that explanation. They healed the sick and fed the hungry and brought peace to worlds that had known only war. And slowly, one mind at a time, the galaxy began to change. Not everyone changed in the same way. Some beings chose full transcendence, leaving their physical bodies behind and joining the human collective. Others chose partial transformation, keeping their bodies but expanding their consciousness. Still others rejected the changes entirely and continued living their normal lives. The humans accepted all choices equally. They had learned long ago that forcing change on unwilling beings only led to suffering. True growth had to come from within. Reported back to the collective at the end of each day what she had learned and asking for guidance. The debates among the transcended continued, but they were gradually moving toward consensus. The galaxy was changing for the better. The fear was fading. The future was bright. And somewhere in the dimension between dimensions, Kyle finally allowed himself to hope that they had made the right choice 500 years ago when they fled into the unknown. 1,000 years had passed since the day the Galactic Council voted to destroy humanity. 1,000 years since Kyle gave the order that saved his species. 1,000 years since the blue dot called Earth vanished from the universe. The galaxy was different now. The old borders between species had faded. Beings who had once fought wars over territory now shared worlds and raised families together. The ancient hatreds that had burned for millennia had cooled into distant memories. Children learned about the old conflicts in history classes and shook their heads in confusion, unable to understand why their ancestors had been so afraid of each other. The transcended humans were everywhere and nowhere. They existed in the dimension beyond physical reality, watching over the galaxy like gentle parents watching their children play. They intervened when necessary, getting asteroids away from populated worlds, whispering ideas into the minds of leaders who faced difficult choices, appearing in dreams to comfort those who were suffering. But they did not rule, they did not command. They simply helped, asking nothing in return except that the beings they helped try to become better versions of themselves. Hayes stood in the Great Hall of the Galactic Council, the same hall where her species had been condemned to death a millennium ago. The chamber looked different now. The old seats had been replaced with comfortable couches where delegates from 100 species sat together in mixed groups. The harsh lighting had been softened to a warm glow. Plants from a dozen worlds grew in containers along the walls, filling the air with sweet scents. Beside her stood Gentle Wind, who had been the first non-human to achieve transcendence, and who now served as a bridge between the physical and dimensional realms. Her body still looked like an furry and gentle and kind, but her eyes held the same starlight that burned in its gaze. "We have come a long way," Gentle Wind said, looking around the chamber at the beings who had gathered for the anniversary celebration. 1,000 years ago this room was filled with fear. Now it is filled with hope. Hope is a powerful thing. It can build worlds and move mountains and turn enemies into friends. The new High Arbiter approached them. She was a being of mixed heritage, her mother and her father, her body a beautiful blend of glowing skin and soft fur. Her name was Dawn Light, and she had been chosen to lead the council not because of her species, but because of her wisdom and compassion. Ambassador Hayes, Dawn Light said, using the formal title that still found amusing after all these centuries, we have prepared something for this occasion. With your permission, we would like to share it. Smiled, of course. Dawn Light raised her hand and the lights in the chamber. A holographic display flickered to life, showing an image that made breath catch in her throat. It was Earth, not as it had been on the day of the Exodus, but as it was now. The blue planet hung in the void, restored to its original position around the yellow sun, exactly where it had been 1,000 years ago. But it was not empty. The continents were covered with cities and gardens, a mixture of human and alien architecture blending together in beautiful harmony. We built it, Dawn Light said softly, all of us working together. Every species in the council contributed resources and we used the knowledge your people shared with us to restore your. It took 300 years, but we wanted to give you something in return for everything you have given us. Felt tears forming in her eyes, or the dimensional equivalent of tears. She had not expected this. She had not even dared to hope for it. You rebuilt Earth, she whispered. You gave us back our home. You gave us the stars, Dawn Light replied. This seemed like a fair exchange. The celebration that followed was the greatest gathering the galaxy had ever seen. Beings of every species joined together to the anniversary, and to welcome the transcended humans back to their restored. There was music from 1,000 cultures, food from 10,000 worlds, and laughter that echoed through dimensions. Kyle appeared beside as the festivities continued. His form was solid enough to be seen by physical beings, a courtesy he extended for special occasions. He looked at the blue planet floating in the display and shook his head in wonder. I never thought I would see it again, he said. I made peace with losing Earth centuries ago. I thought it was gone forever. Nothing is gone forever, replied. That is the lesson we learned when we transcended. Everything that ever existed still exists somewhere in some form. The universe does not forget, it only transforms. And now, Kyle asked, what happens next? Looked around at the celebration, at the beings who had once feared humanity and now called them friends, at the galaxy that had changed so much since the day she stood on a beach with her son and watched the sunset. Now we keep going, she said. We keep teaching, we keep learning, we keep growing. The universe is infinite and eternity is long. We have barely begun to explore what is possible. Do you think they will follow us? Kyle gestured at the physical beings around them. Do you think they will transcend like we did? Some of them will, others will choose different paths. The beauty of consciousness is that it can evolve in countless directions. We are not the final form, we are just one possibility among many. The celebration continued late into the night. Stories were shared and songs were sung and promises were made. The Galactic Council formally welcomed humanity back to physical space, offering them their restored as a permanent embassy between dimensions. And in the quiet moments between speeches, found herself thinking about the photograph she had left in the asteroid field so many centuries ago. The image of herself and her son on the beach, smiling at the sunset, not knowing that their entire world was about to change. Her son was here now, part of the celebration, his consciousness mingled with billions of others but still uniquely himself. He did not remember that day on the beach very clearly. He had been so young then, but he remembered the feeling of her hand in his, the warmth of the sun on his face, the sound of the waves rolling onto the shore. Mom, he said, appearing beside her in a form that looked like the 7-year-old boy he had been on the day of the Exodus. Why are you crying? Wiped her eyes and smiled. Because I am happy, she said, because we made it, because the universe is beautiful and strange and full of wonder, and because after 1,000 years we are finally home. The celebration ended, and the delegates returned to their own worlds. The galaxy continued to turn, stars burning and planets spinning and life growing in all the places where it could grow. The transcended humans returned to their dimension, watching and waiting and helping when they were needed. And on the restored Earth, in a small house on a beach that looked exactly like the one from the photograph, Hayes sat with her son and watched the sunset. Do you think they will remember us? Her son asked. 1,000,000 years from now, when the galaxy has changed again, do you think anyone will remember that humans once existed? Thought about the question. She thought about all the beings she had met, and all the lives she had touched, and all the changes that had happened since the day the council voted to destroy her species. I think they will remember, she said finally, not because we were powerful or special or important, but because we showed them that fear does not have to win, that enemies can become friends, that the universe is big enough for everyone. She took her son's hand, just as she had on that beach 1,000 years ago, and together they watched the sun sink below the horizon. The humans had vanished once. They had fled into the unknown and emerged as something new, but they had never truly left. They had simply changed, evolved, transcended. And in the end, they had come back to share what they had learned with everyone who was willing to listen. The story of humanity was not over, it was only beginning, and the best chapters were still waiting to be written.